Matthew chapter 5, verse 9, it states, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Today, our guests from FPU will be sharing about their study abroad experience in Colombia, South America, and how they were engaging as peacemakers in a foreign land, a foreign country. Please stay tuned. Welcome to Perspectives on Faith and Culture. My name is Karen Crozier, and today I have guest Antonia Guzman, who is a Fresno Pacific University social work student. Welcome to the show, Antonia.
Thank you.
You're welcome. As well, we have Norris Lee, who is a kinesiology student at FPU. Welcome to the show, Norris.
Thank you.
You are two individuals who had the opportunity to go to Colombia, South America, and to engage around peacemaking and identity. Antonia, beginning with you, can you please share what was your perspective of peacemaking before you went to Colombia?
Well, before going on this trip, I had been engaged with the Victim Offender Reconciliation Program that is located in the campus at FPU. So for me, it was, I had a perspective based on the VORP experience that I had working with juveniles and doing mediation at VORP. So I had a mindset of what mediation and what peacemaking was about. So I kind of had an idea of what would be doing, but I wasn't really sure of what would be the experience in a different country.
And then what happened afterwards? So you had this experience working with the Victim Offender Reconciliation Program. What was your experience after you went and now that you're back? Peacemaking.
Yeah, my experience was very unique in the fact that I was able to work with juveniles as I did, or I do at VORP still, but it was in a different context, in a different culture where I was able to connect because of the communication was easy. And so this time it was more of getting to know the young men rather than just having them go through a process like we do at the program. It was more of an engagement. So it was different to see how you can, mediation and interaction is different. Mediation is more formal, you have to do paperwork, do a process, and in Colombia it was different because it was more of an engagement, building a relationship, and getting to know these people in their own, as an individual, not just a person that came through your program as a client.
Yes, and Norris, when you, please share what was your experience of peacemaking prior to your going on the study abroad experience?
For me, it dealt with a lot of inner peace. Definitely from growing up in the streets of Los Angeles and being transplanted to the Central Valley where, you know, being African American is an issue. And so learning how to deal with that on the American side and knowing how to kind of navigate through my own personal demons and try to find a way to have a balance between my identity as an African American male and how do I function as an African American male in a white dominated community. And so before I can even try to deal with the peace on someone else's front, I had to deal with peace on my own front.
And then what happened as you was becoming aware of your own, as you say, your own internal demons, and what does that mean for you to live in a white-dominated culture? And as you go to a Latin American culture where it is not white-dominated per se as it is in the U.S., it has a different understanding of its Latin Euro roots. So share what happened while you were there and now that you're back on peacemaking. Yes.
For me, in terms of that peacemaking, I've always felt, you know, going into it prior to that was at the heart of peace was conflict. And at the heart of the conflict there in Colombia was of a lot of different cultures. And I was able to relate to that because coming from one culture and being transplanted, like I said, into another one, I was able to see how sometimes it's not always easy to coexist. You know, it could be a little tricky. It can become sometimes to be problematic. And engaging with the young men and hearing their stories and really seeing how they engage with the people coming around them, because it's a very transient town or a city, because you have 4 million people living there. So not everyone is from there. And so it was very interesting seeing how my relationship with, you know, the people I was growing up with in America, and how it was very similar to their relationship there. So it was really more of a refinement of my definition of conflict, or my peacemaking abilities, more than it was a redefinition.
So, Antonia, you raised some critical questions or issues around a process, a formal process versus the informal engagement of the ways that you were able to build relationships. What is a way that you see yourself then now as seeking to build these relationships as you continue to see yourself as a peacemaker? But do you see yourself as a peacemaker?
I do see myself as a peacemaker, and I think this experience now that I brought back is going to help me now in my career as a social worker. I'll have to deal with a lot of clients, so this was an experience for me to not, I know that, in your work you do have to follow certain requirements, criteria, where you have to be very formal, but at the same time, when you're seeking peace and justice, I think sometimes you have to go a little bit beyond that and reach out to see this person as an individual, not just someone who you need to give something, or you need to just give them a resource right there and then, but you have to take the time and listen. And that sometimes it's even better for that person to take the time to listen and not just, give them a paperwork to fill out and take home. And, sometimes people need someone else to listen in order for them to gain some peace. So.
Right. So it sounds like you're connecting the heart to heart in who we are as human beings, and not just going through a system.
Yes.
And trying to minimize the role that the system plays, but how do we bring the human element to bear? And so that was something you were able to take away as a prospective social worker. That is great, because we need more of that. Yeah. And Norris, when you look at who you are as a kinesiology major working with the body and the various aspects of our diverse but holistic being, you want to share more about how do you see yourself as a peacemaker, and how do you see the connection in what you are studying, and who do you see yourself as in using the skills in your profession?
It was kind of overwhelming, actually, to see how much my major kinesiology actually brought into some of the theological elements, because most people believe that they're very separate, which I believe too as well. But when I gave my presentation to the young men about peace of the body, and a lot of that friction, a lot of that tension that they have with them is because their bodies are different, right? Their shade of color is different, their hair texture is different, their weight may be different, and so they get criticized for that. So that causes conflict. As me as being a peacemaker and trying to involve my major into how I interact with them, a lot of it had to do with, was showing a lot of the young men, or showing the other individuals I was in contact with, the appreciation of their body and how God made them. Bring it back into Genesis, talk about God made them as His own image, and having them understand that God made you the way you are for a reason, and appreciate that and embrace that identity, rather than being so consumed or preoccupied with the other external things going on, and really helping the young men really find that the way I look is exactly the way I need to look.
Yes. At this time, we're going to look at a segment from Dr. Zosh Lumea, who shares about his connection of how loving our neighbors, as we have hit it at in this process, and how he is doing that here at the Fresno School of Mission. So let's please watch Dr. Lumea.
When we talk about loving our neighbors, not necessarily Christians also, but also neighbors who are speaking different languages, different ethnic group, different culture, different society, but also people who are carrying other passports than American, and people who don't believe in Jesus Christ. Some of them believe in nothing at all, and some believes in other beings than Christ. You can find them in Fresno. But what God has taught me is that I need to learn how to live what I'm talking about. In big languages that you and I talk about, how to profess but also confess. Big language again that you and I talk, the vocabulary of how to have orthodoxies go hand in hand with orthopraxis. That's my experience in Fresno, and I love it.
He's speaking of orthopraxis and orthodoxy. So right thinking is our orthodoxy, but our orthopraxis is our right practice. And so you have indicated, wow, how you have experienced peacemaking in Colombia and how it's come back to impact you here. Any comments you would like to raise in light of what Dr. Lumea raises? Beginning with you, Norris, anything you would like to add?
I agree with a lot of what he said. Actually, to piggyback off a little bit, he said to actually do what you say. I remember being in Colombia. One of the things when I hooked up with Pastor Horacio Aleman and we were doing some evangelistic work with him, I remember a lot of the Colombians were really upset with a lot of the past Christian missionaries that came there because of exploitation. And they really wanted to see God. They didn't want to hear about God. They wanted to see God. And for me, it was easy because the presentation was there. I was African American. A lot of them were Afro-Colombian. And so it was easy for them to relate to me. And I could talk about my story and about how God has transformed me and got me in this position where now I'm speaking to them about God. And so coming back to Fresno, it really empowered me or it really infused or kind of ignited this passion about, I need to be about what I'm saying I'm about. And that's just, for me, that's part of the package, is really, if you're going to confess it or profess it, that it needs to be part of your daily life.
Antonia, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, basically we always hear, actions are more important sometimes than words. We can say a lot of words and speak a lot of words, but sometimes our actions don't really demonstrate what we say. So it's important that we stick by our word if we say something that we want to do to actually, accomplish it.
Yes, one of the things that when we go to another country, another culture, then we return back to the U.S., it's always this cultural shock. We have a culture shock when we enter the other country. Then when we come back after experience, wow, how do I get back into my flow of where America is or the U.S. is? What were some of your challenges in that process? And before we go to that question, we're going to have to take a break, and we will pick back up there after the break.
For over 25 years, KNXT has been serving the people of the San Joaquin Valley with good family television that's just not available anywhere else. It's important for you, the viewer, to help support this valuable tool of ministry. KNXT needs to continue to grow and bring you important programming about your faith. But sometimes it's hard to stop and find the time. Make it easy. Go to knxt.tv and find out how easy it is to support your Catholic television station, KNXT TV.
Welcome back to the show. Today we are discussing peacemaking and identity with FPU students and their study abroad experience in Colombia. We left off before the break of looking at how do we come back to a place after we have been transformed from the experience that we have encountered. What have been some of your challenges or disappointments in this process? We begin with you, Antonia.
For me personally, coming back, a challenge is always going back to your church and hearing, what people are saying and what people are doing, and you're just like, man, if you were to go somewhere else and see it different, it's hard to kind of like be able to get your mindset together again and just, not be so judgmental of your own congregation, because for me that was a big challenge, that sometimes I would sit there and listen and start making judgments of what was being said or some of the actions because of my experience. So that was a challenge for me, but I'm thankful that I was able to, I'm like, we're in America, it's different here, to kind of get my mindset that when you're in a different country, you see things different. So for me, it's like, okay, now you gain this experience, let it change your life, let it transform your life, and for you to make that difference. And if you're seeing that there's something you're not liking, then maybe you should start making a difference so that people can see that you have been changed.
So it sounds like, yeah, the peacemaking work continues to
Yeah.
reintegrate back into our own communities. Thank you. Norris, what has been some of your challenges or disappointments or in coming back?
For me, really it was kind of, I think you may hit it on the head with the culture shock, was so much, not when I went there, it was actually coming back. I had more of a culture shock because being in Colombia on just the simple things, there's so much activity, you know, so much relationship things going on. And even though there's so much, you can say called darkness, there is a lot of light there. There's a lot of love there, a lot of passion. And I remember talking to that with the young men about conviction, passion, and practice. And a lot of the issues I had coming back home was the passivity of a lot of my counterparts, a lot of my peers, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of people I work with, and seeing their almost their impotence, right, into actually going into action. And that's one of the things I talked about earlier in the show about the issues with some of the Colombians, right, the passivity, right? They don't want to hear about God. They want to see God. They want to feel God. They want to experience God. And a lot of times I feel coming back to America, there's a lot of talk. And there's not a lot of action. It's not about what we want to do. It's about what can we do. Let's talk about it. Let's table it next week and maybe we come back and revisit it. Well, there sometimes they don't have a week. You know, you have people who get gunned down for owing the cartels, 5,000 pesos, which is about $2.5 American dollars. And so they need God right now. And for me coming back home, that was really the culture shock. Because you hear a lot of times, you see the TV shows, give 25 cents, help this kid in Africa, send a candy bar to the kid in Haiti, and so for me, I wanted to see more action. And I really felt a fire in my belly when I came back home. And which kind of ignited my Spanish Bible drive, which I'm sending in the back about 250 Bibles back to Cali, Colombia. And so it definitely, invoked a passion in my heart.
Dr. Zaslamea raises a critical question for us when he says how we need to be not only givers, but receivers. Let's listen to his second segment as he shares about what it means to not only be a giver of the faith, but also how do we reciprocate. Let's watch.
And these are not ideas, these are facts. And when I see some of these people now working, but also giving me what I need in order to help someone else who is in need. For example, I'm praying for 200 turkeys. And right now, someone else told me, hey, I'm going to give you 50. I cannot give 200, but I'm going to give 50. And some of these people who are giving used to be on the other side of the receiving side. And now that they work, they want to give back. Those are stories that are just transforming my theology. When I come out of Fresno in this room and read the Bible and hear about God, the Holy Spirit, who is giving love, agape, to his people, it makes it, again, alive. I don't mean that the Word of God is not alive, but it's something to see it transform my life as I learn from maybe someone who is not reading the Bible, but who is listening to the Lord, who is the Prince of Peace, and who gives me the knife, saying, no more using this knife to do harm. I want you to take it, and I want you to tell me more about your Jesus Christ. So that peace theology in practice is really transformational.
Yes, wow. Trading in the weapon of hate or violence to receive and hear about Jesus, a weapon of the Prince of Peace. What has been some of your experiences between faith and peacemaking? Now, even there, you have shared a lot about the internal work and the professional, but now we look at the personal faith in peacemaking. What has transformed for you as we listen to Dr. Lamea? Let's begin with you, Antonia.
I think something like one of the things he mentioned is sometimes, we want to receive and we want to give. So for me, I feel like sometimes I'm like more of a giver. I give, but sometimes you also need to receive. And so I feel like what he was saying, it's important to learn how to receive, because sometimes that can bring peace. Sometimes that there's someone else that wants to bring peace for us. So we have to learn to receive from others, because often We think, yes, I'm a peacemaker, I'm giving peace, but we also need to receive peace from others. So,
Norris, thank you. What do you have?
Kind of to piggyback on what Antonia said, with kind of my disposition. As being an American, even being African American, I've got this idea that I can only give. You see it on television. You see us always helping other nations. And I never thought, even going into that situation, that there'd be something I could receive back. And so going into Colombia and engaging and talking to them back, it was interesting sometimes when I was debriefing with one of the gentlemen that went with us, James Graham, and talking about, man, I really felt something in there. More than me just, trying to minister to these men, I felt something coming back. And I wasn't sure necessarily what it was until I started having to kind of recalibrate my lens, per se, and see that these young men have something to give. And I need to be willing and accepting to receive, more or less than being like, I'm here to teach you something. And having that disposition, and it really helped me coming back home and seeing that, it's not always about being the American and being the athlete and I have something to give when I do have something to receive. There is something for me to learn and grow as well.
As you share, one of the moments that came back to me that was very profound of me receiving while in Colombia was when there was some tension that had emerged and I was concerned about what was going on, and one of the young men just came and started praying for me in Spanish, El Amor Jesus, the love of Christ, de Jesus Cristo. And the other one just held me as I was crying. And it was just beautiful to know that, wow, they were there and sensitive to the need as well. And I was able, as Antonio was saying, although I was the professor on the trip and leading the process, I also was able to receive from the young men in whom we were serving with. So when we look at our overall faith in peacemaking and the giving and the receiving, what is one thing you would say that your faith has been, how has your faith been shaped? Now we're speaking specifically of your faith, of who you know God to be in your Christian walk. What would you say would be the most crucial thing? Let's start with you, Norris. What has been shaped?
It makes me go to a verse in Matthew, 10:34, when Christ talks about bringing division. I didn't come to bring peace, I come to bring a sword. And I really started thinking about that verse and really thought about what he was saying is that when you're telling people something they don't like to hear, either it be the truth or whatever the case may be, there's going to be division, there's going to be conflict. But within that conflict, there's an opportunity to bring peace. And that opportunity can't be neglected, because sometimes we get so caught up in our own stance, our own faith, right? Like I said, there are different denominations of Christianity, right? That means there's different discussions about how they serve Christ. And so when I come into that situation, that context in Colombia, it was, I think, peril for me to understand, and very important, very pertinent for me to understand that we're all the same potato, right? This Christianity potato, but we just peel it a little differently. And me appreciating that and how they view their faith, how they practice their faith, and even some of the things that I picked up on is that it increased and I feel it helped develop my own personal walk with God. And it really made me accentuate the relationship and the walk that I was trying to develop and the things that I was trying to teach them. And I said in reciprocation, they were teaching me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Antonia.
I think for me personally, how I demonstrate love was one of the things that kind of, I reflected upon and I see different now. Because I know, we know God sent his son in the form of a human so he can demonstrate his love for us. And I think about it and I'm like, well, I am a human. I'm a child of God. So how am I demonstrating his love towards others? How am I bringing peace to someone else through God's love? So it has made me question for my own self, how do I demonstrate love and compassion for others, even though, the Bible tells us to love our enemies. How am I loving my enemy? How am I loving that person that I may dislike? How God has called me to love and, We want to be peacemakers. We don't want to be, cause violence or conflict. So how am I loving? That has been one of the things that I still been reflecting upon.
Right, and in the cross-cultural experience, Dr. Lumea shares this, that we're going to look at this last segment from this interview.
So I understand that. But when Christ is Lord of Lords and I worship him, to follow him is no longer a choice. It's a way of life. When he moves from Jerusalem to Samaria, if I'm with him, it's a movement. I cannot stay in Jerusalem. Then I am disobedient. But if God the Holy Spirit has put a strong bond between him, between Jesus and my life, when Jesus is the master and I'm the disciple, to go in this neighborhood in Samaria or to go to the end of the world, it's just a way of obeying him. The issue is obedience. Did I hear God the Holy Spirit telling me to join him? Because I'm not bringing God in a neighborhood. I'm not bringing him in Fresno or bringing him in Congo. I take teams from this part of Atlantic to bring them to Congo. We are not putting God in our luggage to bring Jesus in Congo. We are just following him.
A way of life in obedience. Thank you for being a part of the show today, Antonia Norris, and your contributions and your experience. And you can watch KNXT.TV online of Perspectives on Faith and Culture, as well as to send back comments or feedback concerning the show. We hope you will do so at KNXTV at dioceseoffresno.org, as well as to watch us on Thursdays at 8 p.m. and Fridays at 1 p.m. Thank you for watching. Take care and God bless.